Welcome inside the secret Gibby headquarters for another edition of Gibby's Football Podcast. I am your host, Zach McGibbon. Welcome to the new year, everybody. It's 2023. I am all alone for this episode of Gibby's Football Podcast as we're in the final week of the NFL season. Also coming up, the National Championship game on January 9th on Monday. We're going to look at that as well. A lot to talk about. It's been quite the new year, hasn't it? Not only just in pro wrestling, but just around the world in general. Or I mentioned pro wrestling earlier. Boy, thought this was the This Is Wrestling podcast, but no, there has been a lot going on in pro wrestling. I mean, Vince McMahon is back. A lot to talk about there. That's going to be coming up on the next episode of This Is Wrestling. I may be talking about this topic on another show, potentially, maybe. We'll see. Let you all know about that. So keep an eye out on Twitter for that stuff, but definitely we'll be discussing it on the next episode of This Is Wrestling. So something to keep an eye out there. Of course, I'd be remiss if we brought up in the football podcast what happened this past Monday with Damar Hamlin. 24 years old, Buffalo Bills safety, went into cardiac arrest during the game against the Cincinnati Bengals. A scary sight that Monday. I did not watch the entirety of the game live. I actually jumped into the game a little bit later. Just finished recording an episode of This Is Wrestling with Lever Sage. And just finished up the editing of it. Decided to turn on the television. Watch the game. And around that same time, I got a message from actually one of the many co-hosts, special guest co-hosts on this show, Jonathan Skuse. And they discussed about how there's something going on in the field. Somebody was down. What's going on? And I had the audio on, of course. And on the audio, they were talking about how went in for a hit. They showed a replay of it at the time because it was still very fresh of what happened. And so they went in for a tackle. Damar Hamlin did on T. Higgins. He took a big hit, went down, went back up. Started to feel a little bit wobbly. Started to feel a little bit weird. And then all of a sudden he collapses. And that was quite the sight to behold. Seeing that happen out on the football field. And right then and there he went into cardiac arrest. Couldn't breathe. Had no pulse. Fortunately for the EMTs that were there, they were able to bring him back to life. I saw a report that they brought him back to life twice on the field, which is just a crazy thought. And after all of that, I was debating on even doing an episode, just depending on how Damar Hamlin would do, if he was even going to make it. A couple of days ago, that really seemed up in the air. Fortunately, he's made a lot of progress in the last couple of days. And as I'm recording this episode today, he spoke with teammates over FaceTime. And it sounds like his recovery is going really, really well. So that is very good news to hear. Hopefully he's able to make a full recovery. So that is what's going on with Damar Hamlin stuff as of this recording. It sounds like he's going to be all right. Hopefully we'll see where his state is at in the next couple of days in terms of what he's able to get back physically. It sounds like he's neurologically sound, which is good. It's just a reminder of the dangers of football and what it could bring. Obviously, a lot of discussion about concussions in the NFL. And in this case, obviously, it was a cardiac event. The safety of the game, the future of the game, a lot of talk about that. But at the end of it all, you just hope that Damar is okay, and it looks like he's going to be all right. So that is fortunate stuff on that front. But with the change of Damar Hamlin, or rather the injury of Damar Hamlin, comes a change to the way that the postseason will look like, the final game of the season, who clinches, who doesn't clinch. And so we're going to take a look at that now that things have improved a little bit on the Hamlin front. We'll see what the playoff structure will be like. And so it was announced this past Thursday that Bills and Bengals, that game where Damar Hamlin got hurt, would be canceled. That game is not happening. There's not going to be a makeup game. That will be ruled a no contest. And so not crazy playoff implications for either team when it comes to the Bengals and the Bills. Really, for both squads, it's just a matter of home field advantage. But this is going to change quite a bit. So, with the impact of the Bills-Bengals game being canceled, I'll share the notes here in a second. But the Bengals have clinched the AFC North. Ravens cannot win the division, so the Bengals and the Ravens, they're supposed to face off this Sunday. But no matter what happens in that game, whether the Ravens win or whether the Ravens lose, they will not be the AFC North division champions. But having said that, the Bengals can no longer obtain the AFC's number 1 seed and first round bye. The Chiefs will clinch the number 1 seed with a win at the Raiders or a Bills loss versus the Patriots this Sunday. The Bills can clinch the number 1 seed with a win versus the Patriots and a Chiefs loss at the Raiders. And in the case of the Bengals, they'll finish number 2 with a win versus the Ravens and a Bills loss to the Patriots. In any other scenario, the Bengals will earn the number 3 seed. So that's where it is playoff-wise when it comes to the aftermath of the Damar Hamlin injury. And there's also going to be a change to the AFC Championship game. And it looks like it may be played at a neutral site if these scenarios are played out. So if Buffalo and Kansas City both win or tie in Week 18, both teams advance to the AFC title game. Now, of course, if both teams win in the AFC title game. The second scenario, Buffalo and Kansas City both lose, and Cincinnati also loses or ties in Week 18, and Buffalo and Kansas City advance to the AFC title game. Or number 3, Buffalo and Kansas City both lose, Cincinnati wins, and the AFC title game is either Bills-Chiefs or Bengals-Chiefs. So those are the scenarios for a potential neutral site game in the AFC Championship, which that's almost like a Super Bowl right there in the AFC, playing at a neutral site. So that's going to be one of those, we're going to cross that bridge when we get there scenarios, if that's the case. And judging by the quality of teams that's involved in the AFC here with the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals, that's really not out of the realm of possibility that the AFC Championship game will be played at a neutral site, especially if it's the Bills and the Chiefs. Those two are very clearly the favorites. And so there's also a scenario where it could be a Bengals-Ravens playoff game. And if that's the case, then home field advantage will be determined by a coin flip. So, depending on this coin and where it lands and whatever is called heads or tails, will be the key factor determining whether the Ravens or the Bengals end up as the home team for their game against each other, if that is the scenario in the playoffs. So, had to switch some things around when it came to the injury to Damar Hamlin. Not an easy situation to be in, obviously. No precedent-setting incidents in the NFL like this when it comes to canceling the game, ruling it a no contest. So this is the best the NFL was able to come up with. I know there's some criticism of it, and I understand it is a little convoluted. I had to do a couple of takes on this to try and really understand what they were trying to go for. But at the end of it all, it's very easy to sit back and look at it and criticize and look at every minute detail. But at the end of the day, we're looking at this from a situation where we're not in the room. We're not in the boardroom of the NFL or talking with the teams or meeting with the owners. There's no situation like that as fans. And so we have to take that into account, where it's very easy for us when we're not in there, we're not in the heat of the moment trying to make the decision. It's these guys and girls making the key decisions when it comes to what happens on the field. And so I think this is the best of a really awful situation. Could it be better? Probably. Could it be worse? I think this could be much worse. But nonetheless, that's what's going to happen on the playoff seeding front when it comes to the Damar Hamlin stuff. One last quick thing, a big shout out to the University of Cincinnati and their medical center for what they've been able to do to treat Damar Hamlin in the hospital. And a shout out to the EMTs and the emergency staff that were quick on scene, and they very much saved this guy's life, which is just crazy to really think about. And yeah, this is just a situation that you don't expect to see in the NFL at all. Even with what's been going on with concussions and talking about upgrading equipment and trying to make the game safer, this is still something that is just unbelievable to witness when it happens, especially the scenario, the way it played out on TV. You had a key game between the Bills and the Bengals, and then you just see that as you're watching it 1 week before the end of the season. It's quite incredible what was witnessed, and I had to give a shout out as well to the ESPN crew for how they handled it. Again, no precedent to look off of, no other example look off of. They set the precedent when it came to that sort of coverage. And I thought the way that Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, the folks in the studio, Scott Van Pelt and Ryan Clark, my goodness. The conversation that SVP and Ryan Clark had in that studio was just, you really connected. And I think Ryan Clark especially was what really hit for me. As a former football player, Clark is, to be able to explain the trials and tribulations, if that's the best term, of a player and trying to maintain safety, and especially in the case of Ryan Clark, his own personal experience coming out of not a football game, but rather a practice. I believe it was during training camp, his own near-death experience. And the way that Clark really articulated everything was pretty incredible to watch and listen to. And I thought the way that really just that whole ESPN crew handled it with class and professionalism was really just top-notch. And I commend them for really a crazy situation that they were thrown into. And to be able to handle it like that, I think has to be commended. So a kudos to the ESPN crew. A kudos to the EMTs and the medical staff that were there that night, able to rush onto the field to save Damar Hamlin's life. The staff at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center for being able to treat Damar Hamlin. And of course, Damar Hamlin himself for fighting through, continuing to fight through, getting better, and just the amazing support that he's received. Last I checked on the GoFundMe page for his fundraiser. Last I checked, and this was a while ago, so it's probably gone up a little bit more, but I saw it was $6.5 million being raised for this guy, which is just, it gives me a little bit hope that in society that there's still unifying factors. And this was obviously one of them. And so all in all, it looks like Damar Hamlin's getting better. He's feeling healthier. Hopefully he gets a speedy recovery. A lot of things to look at. I know there's been a lot of talk about the NFL and its handling. They were discussing on the broadcast in terms of 5-minute warm-up and then they will go right back to playing. NFL disputes that. ESPN stands by it. With the history of the NFL, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure if I could believe the NFL, to be honest. I want to believe that there was just some form of miscommunication and maybe it was just lost in translation, but there was plenty of times that the NFL could have shut that down on the ESPN broadcast, and they didn't. They didn't take that opportunity. There's a part of me, and I want to stay optimistic on it, but it's just, there's a part of me that just totally believes that they're trying to cover their tracks. And you just, again, look at their history, especially with concussions. You just look at the history and their pattern and track record, and find it hard to believe. I know Troy Vincent was very emotional in the conference calls, and maybe it's not Troy himself. But that organization, like, I love the game of football. I love the players that play, the teams, but the NFL itself, the organization, has shown time and time again that it is a league that just continues going forward. But nonetheless, I hold my breath on there being some sort of mix-up, some miscommunication, and I think the NFL did really want to continue with the game as quickly as they could. But having said that, again, kind of going back to my previous point, it's very easy for me to sit here with my microphone and my chair and my computer and just say, "Oh, the NFL did that wrong." It's very easy for me to say that, but I wasn't there in the heat of the moment trying to make that decision. I wasn't the lead, I guess in this, for lack of a better term, play caller to make the final decision. So I don't know. At the end of it all, it's just, I think certainly the NFL has some questions to answer. I hope it's pressed on a little bit more. But at the end of it all, it's good to see that Damar Hamlin's getting better, healthier. His breathing tubes removed, so he's breathing on his own, which is huge. Just a huge stride. All the best to Damar Hamlin and his family and the fans of the Buffalo Bills and the whole organization. It's been really cool to see people sort of unify and get behind Hamlin and his fundraiser, his charity. Just fantastic stuff. So good to see he's getting better. So we talked about changes to the playoff picture when it comes to the Damar Hamlin stuff, specifically for the Bills and the Bengals, and what it'll look like on the AFC playoff picture side. Let's take a full look at the playoff picture as we enter Week 18 of the NFL. This is going to be a big week. It's final week. Some clinching scenarios, some big games happening. We're going to get a Saturday and Sunday slate of games. Saturday, I believe there's 2 games. Sunday, of course, the rest of the games in the NFL. So where do things stand right now in the NFL when it comes to playoff matches? Well, if the season ended right now, as it has for years before the last season, this was the way. But obviously, recently, the addition of a new week. So here's how the playoff matchups stand right now. If the season ended today, the Kansas City Chiefs have the wild card round bye. They are first in the AFC. They would get the home field advantage and the first round bye. The next slot down, the Buffalo Bills, they would take on the 7th-ranked New England Patriots. That'll be a big playoff game if that is how it ends up being. The other game, Cincinnati Bengals winning the AFC North. They could have a division matchup within the playoffs in the wild card against the Baltimore Ravens. They'd be ranked 6th currently. And then right now, as it stands, the Jacksonville Jaguars are winning the AFC South. They would take on the LA Chargers in a big matchup. Teams that have clinched postseason berths in the AFC, we mentioned earlier the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals. They have all clinched. The Ravens have clinched. And the Chargers have clinched. The AFC South still very much up for grabs. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let's take a look at how things stand in the NFC on the other side of the bracket when it comes to the playoff picture. Right now, if the season ended with a wild card round bye, it's the Philadelphia Eagles with the first slot. The next game, San Francisco 49ers. They're currently ranked 2nd. They would have their own divisional matchup against the Seattle Seahawks. They're ranked 7th. The Minnesota Vikings, number 3. They would take on the New York Giants. And then a game that I, as a Cowboys fan, would have circled, it would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Dallas Cowboys if the season ended today. Teams that have clinched a postseason berth, the 49ers have clinched the West, the Vikings have clinched the North, the Buccaneers clinching the South last week, beating the Carolina Panthers. Still up for grabs in the NFC East between the Eagles and Cowboys. But they have both clinched a playoff berth nonetheless. Also clinching a playoff berth, the New York Giants. So here are the AFC playoff clinching scenarios as we head into Week 18. The Kansas City Chiefs, they take on the Las Vegas Raiders. That game taking place Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Kansas City will clinch its home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs with a win or if Buffalo loses. So something to keep an eye on there. The Jacksonville Jaguars, They have two ways they can clinch, not just winning and or tying against the Tennessee Titans, where they get the rare night game. The Jacksonville Jaguars getting a night game. Tony Khan must be happy about that. The Jacksonville Jaguars can clinch the AFC South with a win or tie, or they can clinch a playoff berth overall if Miami loses, New England loses, and Pittsburgh loses. So there's two ways they can get in, but you don't want to take that risk. Win and you're in, I say. Don't take that risk. And of course, the Tennessee Titans, who the Jaguars are facing Saturday night at 8:15 p.m. Tennessee can clinch the AFC South with the win. And that's the only way they could get in, so they have to win their game, a must-win on Saturday night. Sticking with the AFC, Buffalo Bills, mentioned earlier, they could clinch home field advantage through the AFC playoffs with a win and a Kansas City loss. So that'll be important for them. New England Patriots, always in the mix somehow. Bill Belichick, not going to go away that easy. He may not have Tom Brady, but he's still going to make things competitive. New England can clinch a playoff berth, get into the wild card round with a win against those Buffalo Bills, or Miami loses, Pittsburgh loses, and the Jaguars win their football game. How about that? That's the scenario for the Buffalo Bills on Sunday at 1 o'clock. The Miami Dolphins, led by Skylar Thompson. That's right, Skylar Thompson is the starting quarterback. No Tua, no Teddy Bridgewater. They're rocking with the rookie third stringer, Skylar Thompson. And that rookie third stringer is facing off against the New York Jets. The Dolphins can clinch a playoff berth if they win and New England loses. So important game for them in the AFC. And then finally, who'd have thought this? The Pittsburgh Steelers have a chance to make the playoffs. Mike Tomlin has a chance to have a winning record again if Pittsburgh clinches a playoff berth with a win and a Miami loss and a New England loss. That is the way that Pittsburgh can get in, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are facing off against the Cleveland Browns. That is possible. That is very, very possible. It's a division matchup. You're always going to get the best, even with the Browns eliminated from playoff contention. The Browns want to play spoiler. A lot of motivation for this game for the Steelers. Kenny Pickett has been looking really good. Hey, on this show, I've said, hey, keep an eye on Kenny Pickett. I think this guy's pretty good. I think he's a good quarterback, and he's been getting better. So keep an eye on him. This could be a big, shining moment for him just in his rookie season. Steelers have a chance here. We'll break down this game in a little bit. And the other games in the AFC. We're going to look at the NFC playoff clinching scenarios. The Philadelphia Eagles can clinch home field advantage, the first slot in the NFC, throughout the NFC playoffs, if they win or Dallas loses and San Francisco loses. And Philly has a chance because they're facing off against a Giants squad. While, yes, they have clinched the playoffs, they are in. Yes, it's a divisional foe. But, I mentioned earlier, the Giants have won earlier. No motivation for them to... I take that back. Usually NFL teams, there's always a chance for them to try and win. They want to win their football games. But the New York Giants will likely be playing their backups, save them for the wild card round. And so a chance for Philadelphia to come in and try and clinch home field advantage with a win and eliminate Dallas's chances of getting into the playoffs, or rather getting the NFC East. So a game to keep an eye on there. The 49ers can clinch the first slot if they win and Philadelphia loses. This is a good chance because San Francisco is facing off against a very depleted Arizona Cardinals squad. I see an easy win there. I was going to do... there's a game I'm willing to predict right now. I'm pretty confident in the 49ers winning that one. They've been on a roll recently. Brock Purdy looks to be the guy in San Francisco. And Arizona is just an absolute dumpster fire right now. I'd be shocked if Cliff Kingsbury is still around. Again, the 49ers could clinch home field. They could get first in the NFC if they win and Philadelphia loses. The Dallas Cowboys, my team. You know I love this team. Somehow, some way, I always still cheer for them. I don't know why. It's been a painful couple of years, but hey, not this year. They're 12-4 this year so far. They can clinch first in the NFC if they win and Philadelphia loses and San Francisco loses. That'll be key. That would also give them the bye in the first round. They can clinch the NFC East with a win and a Philadelphia Eagles loss. So a lot needs to go right for the Cowboys. What's really interesting to see will be who can take the last slot to get a playoff berth. Here's the scenarios here. So right now it's a battle between the Seahawks, the Packers, and the Lions. Both, or either all three, 8-8. Here's how it stands. The Seahawks can get in if they win, of course, and Green Bay loses. But here's a key factor. If Green Bay wins their game, they're in. And they're facing off against those Detroit Lions. Oh, by the way, Sunday night game, 8:20 p.m. Something to keep an eye on. Detroit Lions, they could win their game against the Packers, and Seattle loses. Detroit clinches a playoff berth. Ankles could be bitten in the playoffs. Dan Campbell and his team takes it all the way there. We'll keep an eye on the NFC. Let's just go back to the AFC for a moment. Let's just take a look at some of those key games. Let's make some bold predictions before we move on to college football to wrap things up. But back to the Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders game. I see a Chiefs victory here. Raider season is lost. Jarrett Stidham had a really good game. I got to trash these backup QBs more because all of a sudden they get all good. Beginning of the season, I was trashing on Geno Smith. All of a sudden, he's a Pro Bowler. I trash on Jarrett Stidham. All of a sudden, he has one of the best games of his career in his first start. Unbelievable. So that's the secret ingredient if you're a backup quarterback. Be really bad, so I think you're really bad. And then all of a sudden, when I say you're really bad, then all of a sudden you get really good. I think that's the secret ingredient. Not training, not a training camp, not drills, not mini camp. None of that. That's how you become a really good quarterback, is to spite me. But nonetheless, I still think the Chiefs are going to get the victory here. They want to get that home field advantage. I think they'll get the victory here over the Raiders. The Chiefs will come in way more motivated than the Raiders to get a victory. Jaguars and Titans, let's make a call here. I want to see Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs. I want to see what the Jaguars do in the playoffs. Because they got a really fun team, and the thing is they still have some pieces that could really make them better. But we're talking about the now here. And the way that Tennessee is going, they're on a downward trajectory. The way Jacksonville is going, they're on the upwards trajectory. I see the Jaguars winning the AFC South. Let's get on with it. Get on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon. I really want to see it. I don't see it in the Titans. I see it in the Jaguars. This could be a lot of fun. Go Jaguars in this scenario. I picked them to win the AFC South. The Buffalo Bills, they take on the New England Patriots. I think this will be a close one. I mentioned that Kansas City will win earlier, so that would take them out of the running to get the home field advantage. But I still think the Bills have a chance of beating the Patriots. The Bills take a lot of pride in beating the Patriots, and they are very clearly the better team. So I'm going to say the Bills beat the Patriots here in the Sunday afternoon game, which means a New England loss. But what does this mean for the other teams? Well, I look at Miami. They're facing off against the Jets. And that could be a real tough matchup for the Dolphins. You know, I've been singing the praises of the Dolphins throughout this year, but they're a very hot and cold team. They get on these streaks, both winning and losing. This will be a key game for them. Can Skylar Thompson beat the Jets? Can this Dolphin squad beat the Jets? I think this will be a bit of a dogfight between these two teams. But I am going to pick the Miami Dolphins. Yes, I'm sticking by the Dolphins. Am I crazy? Yes. Am I really crazy? Absolutely, I'm really crazy. But I'm sticking with the Dolphins. I've got them winning. I've got them clinching the playoff berth after a New England loss to the Bills. I think the Jets are going to Jets here. We show little glimpses of it every once in a while, but they're still the New York Jets. And the Jets have nothing really to play for. No motivation to clinch a playoff berth. They are out of it. I think the Dolphins win here. Even with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, I think they keep the game plan simple. Utilize the weapons in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Rely a little bit more on the running game with Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert. I think the Dolphins have a chance to win here, and I think they will win this game. Which leaves us with the Steelers. Oh, those Pittsburgh Steelers. I said Miami would win earlier, so they would be out of the running. But what would happen with the Browns? I see them beating the Browns. I think Mike Tomlin's going to continue his winning record, his winning ways. Another season of a winning record. I think this Pittsburgh Steelers squad is going to beat the Cleveland Browns. The Browns showing a little bit of dysfunction with Jadeveon Clowney saying he's probably not going to come back. Saying he wants to go to a team that will utilize his skills. We'll see about that. Myles Garrett not taking too kindly to that comment. I think there's a lot going on with the Browns right now. I don't think they're mentally there. I'm going to pick the Steelers to win. Mike Tomlin gets his winning record, and he may not make the playoffs, but the legacy, the Hall of Fame legacy of Mike Tomlin will continue after this game against the Browns. Let's go to the NFC. Mentioned earlier. This is a big must-win game for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're facing off against the Giants. The Giants will be playing their backups. I'm going to pick the Eagles to win here. And it pains me to say it. I'm a big Cowboys guy. I hate the Eagles. Cannot stand the Philadelphia Eagles. But I have to bring to you, folks, logical and fair takes. And I think the Eagles will find a way to beat the Giants with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. They still have the weapons. They still have a Miles Sanders. They still have an A.J. Brown, a Devonta Smith. They are feeling some pains on the offensive line. So that'll be a big issue for the Eagles. They got to keep that lowered. But if the Eagles don't have to face Dexter Lawrence on the defensive line, who's been such a key performer for that Giants defense, along with their defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, I think if the Eagles can hold off, and if Dexter Lawrence isn't playing, and he's one of the guys also getting stats that he can save them for whomever they face off in the playoffs, likely the Vikings, then I foresee the Eagles winning this one. I think they're motivated. They want to win this one. I'm going to pick the Eagles to beat the Giants. I mentioned earlier San Fran, Arizona. I got San Fran winning this one. So Philadelphia winning earlier. They won't get the home field advantage throughout the playoffs, but San Fran is still a very good team to watch out for. Into the next round, the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Commanders. They'll be facing off against Sam Howell, the rookie for Washington. I still don't understand why Riverboat Ron Rivera benched Carson Wentz or rather benched Taylor Heineke for Carson Wentz. Heineke was the guy that brought you to the dance in the first place, and then all of a sudden, in a key game, you decided to go with Carson Wentz even after, yes, Heineke was showing some struggles. Didn't make sense to me. I don't see Ron Rivera keeping his job at the end of the season. I'm picking the Cowboys to win this one. As mentioned, the Eagles will win, so they will not clinch the NFC East. They will not clinch home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. But nonetheless, I still see the Dallas Cowboys beating the Commanders and getting the big victory. Which leaves us in the final playoff berths here. It's going to be key. Super, super key. I look at the Seahawks versus the Rams, and then obviously Green Bay versus Detroit. What a way to finish off this season. Baker Mayfield's been looking good for the Rams. He had that electric game over the Christmas weekend. He looks like a good fit there. Seahawks have kind of been, I don't want to say downward, but they've been very average. Pro Bowl Geno has not looked like a Pro Bowler. This is going to be tough. This will be tough for the Seahawks here. I think this will be a closer battle than people will expect. I'm going to pull off a shocker here. I'm going to pick the Rams to beat the Seahawks. I think this is a case where a divisional matchup will be big detriment for the Seahawks. I look at the way Baker Mayfield is trying to, really this is an audition for other teams to show, hey, I could be a number one. I could be a QB1 on your team today. Look at what I'm doing in this offense. Look at with the players I am playing with. No Cooper Kupp. No Allen Robinson. No prime receiving targets like that. Only got Tyler Higbee and Van Jefferson. I think Baker's going to come in with something to prove. I think he's going to lead the Rams to beat the Seahawks and get the Seahawks out of playoff contention, which leaves the Packers and Lions. Packers win, they're in. Lions win, and a Seattle Seahawks loss, they are in. Where am I leaning to? We've seen it time and time before with Aaron Rodgers. He pulls off these improbable comebacks. And that just continues later on in his life, in his career. The Detroit Lions finally seemed to put it together after what seemed to be a season where they were going to be somebody you would talk about as a potential top 3 team drafting in the NFL draft. Maybe they would get the 2nd or 3rd overall pick. But they turn it around. The offense clicks. The defense figures it out somewhat. But looking at everything here, and do I want to see Dan Campbell in the playoffs? Yes. Jared Goff making his return into the playoffs. But I am just going to go on precedent here with this pick. For so long, we've seen the Packers beat the Lions in key games and critical games with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Yes, Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the weapons like he had in the years past, but he's developing some good connections with the receivers he's got. Plus, you got that running back duo, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon. I look at that factor, and while the defense is short up for the Lions, it's gotten better. I think Green Bay figures it out. I think they find a way and pull off this comeback. And I think they win and make their way into the playoffs. I think they do. You can't go against history sometimes, and so many times I've seen the Packers just defeat the Lions, and seen Rodgers before talk some trash to the Lions squad. I am picking the Green Bay Packers to win and clinch a playoff berth. And that's a look at your NFL playoff picture for Week 18. To wrap things up, we're going to do a preview of the 2023 College Football Playoff, the National Championship. The Georgia Bulldogs looking to retain their title against a surprising foe in the TCU Horned Frogs. All glory to the Hypno-Toad. This should be a fun game. I think it'll be closer than what people expect because TCU, yes, they're ranked number 3, but I don't think a lot of people had TCU making it to the national championship. What's going to be key for the Georgia Bulldogs is, can Stetson Bennett play at a consistent level to keep his team in it? Because he's not the greatest quarterback in the world, but when he's needed to step up, he's stepped up. So Stetson Bennett is a guy to keep a look at. Yes, I know he was a Heisman candidate, but I know I'm not that impressed with Stetson Bennett. Other players to look at when it comes to the Georgia Bulldogs: Brock Bowers, a top target for Stetson Bennett. On the defensive side of the ball, I look at Jalen Carter. I look at Keely Ringo, a guy who came up clutch last year in the national championship for the Bulldogs with that pick 6. On the TCU Horned Frogs side, Max Duggan, a guy who's just a very good athlete, has looked solid for the Horned Frogs. He's a guy to really root for and get behind. And he's got a good receiving option too. Possibly one of, if not the top receiver in the upcoming NFL draft in Quentin Johnston. 6'4", 215. He's a guy to have circled to keep an eye on. How is he going to perform at a stage like this? I'm sure a lot of scouts will be looking at Quentin Johnson. But it should be noted, Trevius Hodges-Tomlinson, defensive back, one of, if not the nation's top defensive back. Not the biggest guy in the world, 5'9", 177 pounds. But he's been very good for this Horned Frog squad. And then on defensive line is Dylan Horton. Huge in the Fiesta Bowl, just dominant in the Fiesta Bowl. 4 sacks, 6 total tackles. He's somebody that the Georgia Bulldogs will have to keep an eye on. I think this will be very close. Very, very close. I think the Bulldogs will make mistakes. I think the Horned Frogs will make mistakes. But I will give a field goal win to the Georgia Bulldogs. There's a little bit more depth on this Bulldog squad. They have the previous experience winning a national championship last year. I think Stetson Bennett will come up clutch when he's needed to. I've got the Georgia Bulldogs winning the national championship after a hard-fought victory over the TCU Horned Frogs. And TCU would have nothing to be ashamed of because, boy, the Horned Frogs have really made a name for themselves this season. So that is my prediction for the national championship in college football. A game to look forward to on Monday night. And that's it, everybody. That's all I need to discuss. We'll be back next week. We'll be previewing the playoffs next week. We'll see what happened. Were my picks right? Were they wrong? We'll see. Should be exciting stuff. We get back into the swing of things for football. Keep enjoying the games, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.